I love you, Cleveland. And I love you, Ohio. And a very pleasant welcome to this week's version, Bonus Time with Drennan. Hi, I'm Bruce Drennan, along with Ryan Smith, my producer. It's great to have you aboard, as we have a lot to cover today. A very, very special guest in the second segment. Robert Corna will be joining us, a Westlake architect who for over 40 years has been fighting to get the powers that be to recognize how badly we in Cleveland need a dome for our football stadium. And we're going to devote that whole second segment in length to featuring Robert and for him to plead his case. He has a new revolutionary idea called the Megatron. And you can look up the information. We'll give you more on that when we do welcome Robert in that second segment. But in the first segment, we have plenty to cover. And before we get into that, I want to acknowledge that Ryan is here as usual and in good spirits, I hope, despite the fact we got beat last night by about 45 points or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, not a great day, all things considered. Yes, Cavs get blown out. Logan Allen doesn't look very good on the mound. They give up 11 runs, but listen, with the Cavs, I mean, I'd be lying to you, Bruce, if I said I expected a drastically different result here. It would have been nice to see him show up a little bit more, but if we get one, I'd be pretty happy. I know that's not a very good outlook to have on this young Cavs team,
I totally agree.
But the realistic part is
I totally agree.
Yesterday, what I saw was a completely different levels of talent between the Cavs and the Celtics.
Oh, yeah, and they're so much deeper. It's very realistic what Ryan just said. If we can salvage a game, maybe two. If we get two, I would really consider the series a victory. That's how good Boston has been all season long and in this postseason. Jaylen Brown, 32 points for them. Derek White had 25. That's Boston's fourth 20-plus victory in this postseason. Donovan Mitchell did his part. He scored 33 points, but he needed a lot more help than what he got. And again, the Cavs were without Jared Allen. Not that I think he would have made that much difference, but get this. The trio of Strus, LeVert, and Garland combined for only 23 points. And when Mitchell went to the bench, the Cavs were outscored by 14 points. Evan Mobley did his job. He had 17 points and 13 boards. But indeed, this Boston team is really, they've been the class of the NBA all season long. They posted the best record of any team in the entire NBA. And here we are facing them in the semis of the East. I mentioned, I don't know how much difference Allen's presence would make in this series. Do we have any further reports on his status for Thursday's game?
I have not heard anything, Bruce, which is not a good sign. And I got to imagine for him to be sitting out this many games and then when your season's on the line, it can't be good. I imagine it's a little bit more than just a normal rib bruise. I've heard it's very hard for him to even lift his arms up. He's having trouble sleeping at night. And you got to imagine, especially being a big in this league, when you have your hands up pretty much 75% of the time, you're standing on the court. That's got to be something that isn't easy to navigate through. So I'm sure he's doing his best. I respect the fact that he's injured, and I'm sure if he really could go, then he definitely would. But to go with the Cavs, I mean, you can go right down the line. Game 1 against the Celtics is just a continuation of what the entire Orlando series was, and that's Donovan Mitchell just willing his way to the Cavs to even have a chance. And he did that. He scored 30-plus again, and he did what he needs to do. You can go down the line. I mean, Darius Garland has been a shell of himself this entire season since he came back from injury. Max Strus can't hit the side of a barn, let alone the ocean right now. Karis LeVert is arguably the most inconsistent player in the NBA. And while Evan Mobley had a decent offensive game efficiently, his defense is what's keeping him from, that's really his only positive plus right now, because he's not stretching the floor with Jared Allen out, which you thought he was going to be able to do. I don't even think he's attempted a three since Jared's been out. And without Jared, the presence on the glass just was not there. And we let Luke Cornett come in and absolutely just body us, which is very disappointing.
You ever had a rib injury?
I have not, Bruce, fortunately enough, but I've heard they're rough.
I have. And I certainly can relate to not being able to sleep, because every time you turn, it wakes you up. The pain wakes you up. You can't even turn in bed. And it's very difficult to breathe and eat. It's amazing how that affects you in so many different ways. So this is a severe rib injury to have caused him to miss this many games. And we can only hope that he's okay, not just for this series. I don't think it'll make much difference, as I mentioned earlier, but for his career. And he will heal from this, that's for sure, but maybe not for this postseason, which may not last long anyway. Speaking of lasting long, if this goes 4, if they sweep us, or even if we salvage a game, or if we can win 2 games, status of Bickerstaff, what do you think?
Nope, doesn't matter. I think the writing's been on the wall, quite frankly, since we entered the playoffs. I mean, maybe the only way it would have changed is if we looked drastically better than the Magic and we came in and provided a battle against the Celtics. But even then, I think the writing was already on the wall. I think people are tired of the rotations, and maybe it's not all J.B. Bickerstaff's fault because his players clearly are not playing well as their contracts would suggest they should. So while all the blame shouldn't be on J.B. Bickerstaff, we know how the league works. The coaches go before the players. I think we have a new coach next year for sure.
Now, if by some miracle, and I do mean miracle, the Cavs were to beat Boston, then he stays. There's no question about it. But, I mean, you can just listen to Ryan, myself, you. The tone of every Cavs fan, of everybody that knows anything at all about basketball, is facing the reality, the foregone conclusion that we're going to be eliminated by this great Boston team. So, Bickerstaff definitely on the hot seat, regardless of winning the first series against the Magic, you say, huh?
Yeah, I mean, thank God he beat the Magic. I'll say that first of all, because if you would have went out in the first round 2 years in a row, I mean, it wouldn't even be a debate at this point.
Yeah, that's true. I totally agree with that, but they did advance further, as hard fought as it was, Ryan, to the second round. I don't know, though, if he can be blamed. And I think I'm a supporter of Kobe Altman, but I don't know if Bickerstaff can be blamed for the roster. Yeah, you can second guess his rotation. You can second guess matchups, but he can only do so much with the material he has available to him. Let me refresh your memory. In the first half of the season, when this team was missing Mobley and Garland, they ascended to the number 2 seed in the East. Now things went further south, descending to number 4 in the second half when Mitchell got hurt. Shows how important Mitchell is. But I in all due respect, I mean, Altman does what he can do. You're not going to be able to lure big-name free agents to Cleveland. You just can't do that in the inmate-controlled NBA.
Yeah, and I mean, you're absolutely...
But hold on, let me finish my point.
Yeah.
I paused because inmate-controlled NBA is what it is. The inmates are controlling the asylum in the NBA. Let's face it. By some finagling, they can manipulate where they want to play. We've seen it time and time again with LeBron, with Durant, with numerous others. Kyrie Irving, oh my goodness. We've seen it numerous times with these players. They're running the asylum. No big-name free agents are going to come to Cleveland. No big-name free agents wanted to come to Cleveland when LeBron James was here. Even the second time, when Griff got Kevin Love and surrounded LeBron with a championship-caliber team. And we still couldn't lure big-name free agents. Oh, we got Shaq O'Neal after he was over the hill and guys like that. Yes. But you're not going to be able to do that. So this is in defense of Altman that I say this and point this out. This is in defense of Altman. However, and blame him if you want, that's fine, but what I just laid on you is a fact. You cannot get big-name free agents to come to Cleveland, Ohio in the wintertime. Can't do it. Now, with that being said, how do you blame Bickerstaff for not having the physicality that is required in the playoffs. And I think we're seeing that already. The Orlando series was a lot more physical than I anticipated it to be because Orlando is a young, big team, and they played very physical basketball against the Cavs. And even before Allen got hurt, it was evident. So how do you blame Bickerstaff for not having enough physicality? Go ahead, comment on that. Before we go further.
First of all, I love the inmate analogy because I think that is absolutely spot on, and you're 100% correct in the way that the free agency is very special in the NBA. Let's say that. You can attribute that to LeBron James. But anyway, no, you're absolutely right. I do think JB right now has a very unfair hand, given that Kobe Altman dished out $90 million to Max Strus. He dished out 25 to George Niang, your two biggest offseason acquisitions, who, one, have not only shit the bed, quite literally, but they can't even do one thing that they came here to do, and that was to add depth and add shooting from the three-point line. Both of them are shooting a career-low, horrendous clip. So when that happens, yes, JB's hands are tied, and his rotations have to be limited. It sucks. But at the same time, it's like people are just kind of fed up with his lack of adjustments, just screaming at the refs. I just think he also has, I agree, Bruce, 100%, a very hard hand that he's been dealt with this season, including the injuries.
So, do you really think bringing a new coach in with this material is going to make a difference?
I'm not quite sure it will, but something's got to give.
It won't. It won't. And so much, the bench was supposedly bolstered. And I think we saw that. It was evident throughout the season when these injuries occurred that the bench that Altman gave Bickerstaff was certainly better than the bench that we had a year ago when we were eliminated in the first round by New York. I think that's evident. Although here in the Boston series, we're being exposed. I mean, I don't care who Bickerstaff brings off the bench. It's not going to make a difference against this talent-laden Boston team. And then Porzingis is out, and I don't think that makes a difference with them either. That's how good they are. So, all right, the Orlando series victory is what it is, and the Cavs play Game 2 tomorrow night against Boston, down 1-0. And if they lose tomorrow night, I think it's over. At most, it goes 5 because the thought of having to win 4 out of 5 from the Boston team, with them still, having home court advantage, they'd have 2 more games at home. Forget it. I mean, it's just two more games at home. It just is not in the cards. Before we move on, what do you think of Denver losing the first 2 games to Minnesota at home?
I think it's a big product of we're seeing the true development, if you will, of the next face of the NBA, and that's Anthony Edwards. I've been pretty vocal. I think what he does is absolutely amazing. I mean, people are making the MJ comparisons. They play similar. They look alike. Obviously, Anthony Edwards has a whole lot of accolades to do to ever be in that conversation. But, I mean, you're taking out potentially the reigning champs with the back-to-back MVP, maybe winning his 3rd, and you're looking like you're putting the team on the back, telling him to just follow you, and you're taking the lead. And he's 2 years old, Bruce. Yeah. What he's doing is absolutely incredible. And then they just have depth. Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid coming off the bench. Yeah. They really look like a team that's young, but hungry enough and skilled enough to make a deep run in here in the playoffs.
And we had said last week, I believe, on the show, we didn't know if they would be quite ready.
Exactly.
We had Gene Winters on. By the way, we're going to have Gene on again next week. Hopefully not to wrap up the season, but he will be on next Wednesday's show. We also have another guest next Wednesday, Mike Yeager, head golf professional at Columbia Hills, because the PGA Championship, the second major of the 4, will be staged the following weekend. Oklahoma City beating Dallas, taking a lead there. Any comment on that one?
I think it's just another example of OKC's deep and talented. I understand that they're young, similar to Minnesota, but they're even more young. But the realism of it is that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a top 10 player in the league. Chet Holmgren is playing very, very well. Josh Giddey is playing very, very well. And it's just like comes back to this Cavs team, a young team that was able to take all these draft picks, develop them, and now they're feeling the riches of it, the fruits of the labor, if you will. And I don't know if Mavericks have enough with just Luka and Kyrie being the main duo there.
Are you surprised that Indiana gave New York as competitive a game as they did in Game 1?
No, I'm not necessarily surprised. I mean, Indiana is a team that they're a top 5 offense, but I don't think they're going to win because their defense is so abysmal. I understand that the Knicks still don't have Julius Randle, but Jalen Brunson is another guy that's developing into a superstar if you didn't already consider him one. I think like 4 straight 40-point games in the playoffs, he's willing them to victories, and I think the Knicks are the better team. Tyrese Halliburton isn't playing well. It's really Pascal Siakam that's going to have to carry on, but I think we're looking forward to a Knicks Celtics Eastern Conference Finals.
Next week again, Gene Winters will be joining us to talk NBA. All right, horrible news about Stephen Kwan of the Guardians. Hopefully he'll be able to return sooner rather than later. His injury does give an opportunity to a young player like Florial to prove himself. Last night's 11-7 loss to Detroit ended a streak of 5 consecutive outings by our starting pitchers going 5 innings. Last night, Logan Allen lasted only 2 1/3. The question now is the bullpen. The Guardians don't have an off day for over a week to come. And so getting the starters to go deep is vital in keeping the pen from being burned out. The Guards travel to Chicago this weekend to take on the White Sox and then on to Texas before returning home on the 17th for a series against Minnesota, and who just had their streak halted this last week, and then the New York Mets interleague play. The Guards enter today's finale against Detroit, enjoying a 2-game lead over Minnesota. How quickly they got back in the race with that streak. Amazing. And Kansas City, and a 4-game lead over Detroit. Tanner Bybee today, Reese Olson for them. First pitch, 110. Any comment on the Guardians? But I'm a little concerned about that pen.
Yeah, I mean, well, the realistic part of it is you can't replicate what Stephen Kwan means to this lineup. From a hitting aspect of getting on base, leading the American League in average, but also defense and left field. I mean, you can't replicate that. I suppose a silver lining is if an injury did have to happen, it's better that it happens here in May rather than, say, July.
And what are they saying, 4 weeks?
They're saying 4 weeks, so about a month. But you know what? It gives an opportunity. We saw Kyle Manzardo come up. Hopefully he'll get things corrected. And then
he looked. I think he'll be fine.
Yeah.
But he needs to learn that Major League pitching. A little different than AAA.
Yeah, it would. His 5 strikeouts and 5 attempts would say that's very true, Bruce.
Yeah. So, but I think they'll be fine. I'm a little concerned about the pen. I wonder if they're going to bring Curry up to fill a void in that starting rotation, even though Carrasco had a good game.
Yeah.
The fact remains that they're going to need. You can never have enough pitching. You've heard it over and over your entire lifetime as a baseball fan. You can never have enough pitching. So there it is. The Guardians still in first place, thank goodness, and we'll see how things go. And Kwan leading the league in hitting and vying for the batting crown is such an accomplishment, and so we can only wish him well that he gets back sooner rather than later, as I said. Well, the 150th running of the Kentucky Derby was the closest race in the Derby in 47 years. Winner Mystic Dan, Sierra Leone, and Forever Young had a photo finish. Mystic Dan was an 18-1 shot, and the Preakness, Mystic Dan, I hear, may not even race. And I question, how can they not race him? You only get one shot at the Triple Crown. Only one horse gets one shot at the Triple Crown every year. How do you not race him? Apparently, his stable is saying that when he has raced on 2 weeks rest, only 2 weeks, he's done very poorly. Well, again, only one horse gets a chance at the Triple Crown one time. So I think they have to run him. Now, it's a limited field. It's the shortest race of the 3. And it's also a field that will only be 7, 8, 9 horses. The Preakness is the smallest field. And here's another factor. Bob Baffert, the most famous trainer in the world, was banned again from the Kentucky Derby for that scandal a few years ago. Well, he's not banned from the Preakness. And I understand he's going to have 2 horses entered, and both of them are tremendously talented and will probably be number 1 and 2 favorite. I haven't seen the pre-line yet, but so that may scare the Mystic Dan people off a little bit. Did you watch the race? Right.
I did, Bruce, my first one, and I feel like I got a really good introductory for it. You mentioned the photo finish. I didn't bet on it, so it's okay. I didn't lose any money, but I didn't win any money. I don't know if I would have bet on Mystic Dan anyway, so probably a good thing I didn't throw any money on it. But it was cool to see. I love the get-ups. I love the get-up, the mint juleps.
Oh, the pageantry.
The whole nine.
With the
it was cool to see.
The gowns and the hats and the mint julep and everything that surrounds it. And I had a small wager on Honor Marie. A tip from a friend of mine who is supposedly a horse racing expert. By the way, he's no longer a friend. But he came out of the gate terribly. He was in the 7 hole, and he came out of the gate terribly, and he was actually at one point in last place. Well, the past 19 horses in the Kentucky Derby, when you've already run half the race. Impossible. So he wound up taking 8th. He made up that much ground anyway. And it's such a crowded field along the rail, Ryan, you got to go around them if you want to have any chance. And that's a task, too, because they're so bunched together. There's hardly a narrow margin, maybe that much between horses as they're racing. It's an incredible thing. All right, when we get back, Mr. Robert Corna will be joining us. He's the architect from Westlake that is proposing the Megatron to cover the football stadium and keep it downtown Cleveland. This is a segment you don't want to miss. That's next on Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Now here is the risk Brown had to take with Great to have you back. Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. As I promised, Mr. Robert Corna is joining us, a distinguished Westlake architect with a tremendous idea of a glass superstructure around First Energy Stadium that would feature a retractable roof, keep the stadium downtown where it belongs. Over 40 years, Bob has been fighting for a dome stadium in Cleveland, and ironically, he refreshed my memory when I set up the interview that I actually interviewed Bob like 40-some years ago, and we talked about the same subject and how badly Cleveland needed a dome for so many reasons. Bob, good to have you back. How you doing, pal?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And we got 40 years ago, we had this. We just kind of put the Hexatron kind of on hold for a while. But the idea of covering a retractable stadium has never gone away. And just so I can bring you back in history, the Hexatron was the first time anybody had ever introduced a retractable stadium. Never heard of it before. And since then, 9 have been built. And I remember back in that time, everybody says, well, it can't be done. It's too expensive. All the reasons they try to say it today. But I can only say one thing. We as Cleveland deserve a retractable roof stadium. If anyone else deserves it, we do. So I'm in the battlefront here to see that we can get it to happen. But mainly, as a developer in downtown Cleveland, I've developed over 1,000 units, and I did Nautica. I've been involved with the Flats my whole career, and I've seen Cleveland grow from an entertainment standpoint. And I saw it all go away when the Browns left. I saw everything just kind of disappear. And how important the stadium is to not just football, it's to the future of Cleveland. The things that can happen with this stadium are like when it's covered, when the roof can open, is incredible. And you just have to look at Indianapolis and their stadium. It opens. And what do they have? They got NCAA events. They got their own convention center that's attached to it, where they have over 240 events a year that are tied in with the convention center. Well, what's downtown? Our convention center. So what does it help? It helps the convention center. It helps business downtown. But the thriving residential, 40 years ago, nobody lived downtown. Now look what's happened.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
And the change is, I mean, look at what we have. We're the only city that has the three major events downtown. You can walk out your door to three major football, basketball, and baseballs right out your door. So, what does this retractable stadium mean to the future of Cleveland? I'll kind of go into detail, but
And we will, Bob. Let me interject. First of all, as best as words can describe without the video and the benefit of seeing this Hexatron, try to describe it as best you can on how it works, because you would be building it partially onto the lake, I understand.
yeah. Well, one of the big problems the Browns had with remodeling the stadium is where do they play for 3 years? They're going to play in Canton 30. They didn't have the answer. There's the idea of taking the stadium and simply push it out about 100 yards into the stadium, into the lake, which the whole ground underneath the stadium is fill anyway. So you can do it economically, and it costs $1 from the state of Ohio to purchase the submerged lease to build it out on the lake. So by pushing it out there, it does two things. First of all, it gives them the option to build a brand new stadium, and they don't have to remodel the old one, which they're having a problem with, because the old stadium was built too fast with it's got a lot of problems.
Right. Yeah. Because of the urgency of getting the team back. I remember seeing Mike White testifying in front of Congress and saying, we've got to keep our colors. We got to keep the name and bringing it back. So I totally relate to what you're saying as far as the urgency to build that stadium. And you say what are the tell us what the flaws were as a result of that, Bob.
Well, this is kind of interesting. The way that the Hexatron is designed, it's six-sided, so it's a unique triangular structure to begin with. But when you look at the plan, something unique's about it for football. When it has this diamond shape, most of your seats end up on the 50-yard line. Now, not only does that work that way for football, but we can actually have soccer, baseball. We can have any event we want in this stadium because it's designed for the flexibility to become whatever it wants to be. But imagine a stadium where you have most of your seats on the 50-yard line. Now, when you have concerts are huge. For this indoor stadium to have a retractable roof, summer concerts, winter concerts are a big, big part of a stadium today. And now to have the seats arranged so they're more like an amphitheater than they are a stadium, and you feel more into an atmosphere that feels like an indoor stage, makes the Hexatron different than anything else can be built. There's also part of the design is I've extended the sides out and continued them down to the ground level. So around the stadium, I've created a greenhouse. So if you think about the arboretum and greenhouse and trees and plants, but I also look at bars and restaurants inside that can be used year round, and an atmosphere where people will go down there in the middle of January, not just for football, but like in Detroit. Detroit built a wonderful arena there that's for basketball and hockey. It has restaurants inside that are used year round. Well, you know what that does? It brings people to the waterfront instead of 10 days a year. We can start looking at using the stadium. Now, one big item is the Super Bowl. Now, everybody kind of puts that in the back burner. You know how big the Super Bowl could be for Cleveland?
Oh, yeah. Over $1 billion.
$1.5 billion in our economy in one Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they gave LA 2 Super Bowls. They gave Las Vegas 2 Super Bowls for their stadium. If we get 2 Super Bowls, that's $3 billion in our economy. That just, we can't pass it up because it pays for your roof. And I think the idea of tying it in with the Hall of Fame in Canton, we could have one event like nobody else has had. But I can promise you, when you look at the stadium design right now, it's an icon. And if you ever think of the Sydney Opera House pushed out onto their waterfront, why is that such an icon? This could be the icon for Cleveland.
Okay, let me ask you this. Jimmy Haslam, even though the majority of fans, I think, now have come to the realization, and as you know, Bob, when I was hired to replace Pete Franklin, I was screaming at that time when Modell took the Browns to Baltimore that let's build a dome, for all the reasons that you are stating. It was for naught, I guess, at that time. You were right alongside me screaming the same chorus line. Browns owner Jimmy Haslam said at the NFL owners' meetings in Phoenix in March, and I quote, "In all likelihood, it's not going to have a dome, but it'll be a substantial remodel of the existing facility, and we're probably 3 to 5 years from that happening." Why is he opposed? Doesn't he realize that it's feasible to have a dome in downtown Cleveland rather than moving to Brook Park? And I want to get into the Brook Park issue as well with you.
Well, let me start with there's about 20 reasons why he shouldn't do that and why it's his advantage to come here on the lakefront. If you look at the design that I've laid out, it just makes practical sense. Once you push the stadium out into the lake, you tear down the old stadium, you've created probably the most valuable piece of land between Chicago and New York, because now it's all open for development. So he can do what he wants to do. But would you rather be living in a airport atmosphere with planes flying over your head, or would you rather be on a beautiful lakefront that's pastoral and is the center of downtown with the activities of downtown around you? There's no question as a developer, and I'm a developer and an architect too, and I developed the flats on one basis. I did it because of one thing, we had a waterfront. On the second thing, you had people wanting to be entertained in downtown. Why would you want to do that in Brook Park? It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense because he's kind of going against what the community really wants. There's the council of Cleveland have voted 2 weeks ago. They want to keep it downtown. The county wants to keep it downtown. I think that the majority of the people want to keep the stadium downtown. Why not? When you come down for a game, there's more to do than just attending the game. There's things around it. There's restaurants. There's hotels to stay in. Everything is a viable community now that we didn't have 40 years ago. And I'm just trying to look at, why would you go to Brook Park when you could have the land for free?
Is he using this as a political ploy to get his way and keep it downtown, even though it wouldn't be a dome?
You know what? I don't understand their thinking, but I think he's thinking as a businessman. You know, he's trying to kind of emulate what Jones did with Dallas. I mean, he went and built his own stadium, and he owns it, and he put a couple $1 billion into it. But he controls it, he owns it, but he built the development around it. And that's probably the idea of Chicago. And remember, Chicago tried to move. They wanted to build out in the suburbs.
Yeah, Arlington Heights, where the racetrack used to be.
Yeah, and the thing about, you know how they stopped it? Daley, who was
I mentioned that to you on the phone. When I was a boy growing up in Chicago, the Bears had left Wrigley Field, where they played for years, and went to Soldier Field. And that place holds, at the time, it held like 110, 120,000 people. It was ridiculous for football, way too big. So they were talking about going to Arlington Heights and destroying the racetrack and building a new stadium there. And the late Richard J. Daley, the old man, said, "Oh, that's fine." At a press conference, they can go out there, call themselves the Arlington Bears, the Heights Bears, the Arlington Heights Bears. But I'll tell you one thing, they're not going to call themselves the Chicago Bears. That was the end of that. So does Justin Bibb, the question is, does Justin Bibb have that kind of power and leverage with Haslam and the Browns?
Well, he sure can do it. I mean, it's Cleveland's team. They'll be the Cleveland Browns. You can't move them to Brook Park and call them Cleveland if you're not in Cleveland. So, yeah, he has a basis for it. I really believe, this is how I strongly believe, that if I could get 15 minutes, not with his staff, but with him and his wife, and explain all the things about how his development on the lakefront would be far superior than anything he could dream of doing, because he's truly not a developer and he's relying on consultants. Now, when you talk about design, I always come back with, I'm not a large firm. I don't have 250 people, but I'm a creator and I'm very creative in what I do. And I've done a lot of things in development. But one thing that, when you talk about the Eiffel Tower, well, who designed the Eiffel Tower? It was Eiffel. It only took one guy. It doesn't take a team of people. And what he needs to understand is that there's a lot of people underneath him that are blocking me from getting to him. I don't know why, but he's just got to hear me out. He's got to see my model. If anything, I would be able to educate him as to what a third possibility would be. But I have to meet with him.
Well, what is the reason why his staff is preventing you from having a sit-down meeting and a proposal of your Hexatron idea?
I have no idea. But the only reason the only verbiage I get back is we've already hired an architect. We're well along. We're far down the path. We have our own plan already in place. Well, you haven't built it yet. Come on, you're just talking about ideas. And I have a pencil with an eraser, so do their guys. What is the big deal about new ideas? An idea that could change. And I got to tell him, there's one thing that's for sure. With the plan I presented here, that land, when the stadium is taken down, will be the most valuable piece of land on the lake between Chicago and New York.
Right.
There'll be nothing like it. Nothing like it. Why would you pass down the opportunity of doing it? There's another thing that happened. I just read the paper yesterday. The state is not really coming forth with wanting to give him a lot of money. That happened yesterday. He asked for, I guess, $500 million from the state. I've got his answer on how to finance it. I know exactly how to do it. It won't cost him a dime.
How's that?
Well, if you see my plan, and this is probably got to be controversial, but all this, we were supposed to get a casino new when that ballot issue passed. We never got it. They stuffed the casino in an old department store. Right, we didn't get what Columbus had and Toledo had. We got kind of stiffed on that one. So part of my proposal is ask the state of Ohio for a license for a casino. Because, the Browns have already got the license for sports betting, and they want to have a sports betting facility. And I've designed that within the Hexatron. I designed two things, the sports betting facility, and I also designed the amphitheater. So the concept of having next to it, on the lake, a casino tied in with their stadium. What could be, what? That casino will pay for anything they want to do, both here and in Cincinnati. You can give Cincinnati a casino too, a second one. And, Detroit has two casinos. So the whole idea is you don't have to ask for money from the state. Just give us the license to build a casino. So the casino is one avenue I have for paying for it.
Bob, let me ask you this. Because what you're revealing about the state turning down the Haslam request for the money, might part of his reasoning for going to Brook Park be he would reap the benefits of parking concessions, which is not the case in downtown Cleveland?
Well, he's got to see my design. And what happens when you move the stadium and tear it down, the old one, and you have the new stadium out in the lakefront. Now you've got this piece of land. You look at my model and my drawings. Underneath this, on where the stadium is now, you level it, and you can create a huge underground parking lot. And above the parking lot, he can build his residential development on the lakefront. So the parking you'd be hitting, but there's more than, can you imagine that whole space being parking underneath? Well, how do you do that? Well, just go look at the mall where the convention center is. That's all underneath a parking lot.
Right.
So you just do the same thing, just extend it out. There's his parking. And I have to show him there's another thing. There's a couple plans for what's happening with high-speed rails coming to Cleveland, period. And there's going to be rail to Columbus and Cincinnati.
Right.
So we need to have a transportation center. Okay, I've designed in my plan on the model a transportation center that would be, actually I've got the plans to the one that was supposed to be built in the 1900s that never was built. You build that, you build a garage underneath it, and you have parking there, but you also make it a great place where you don't need as much parking because you got a transportation center where people can come, take a train, take the trolley from Tower City. They can come there without having to worry about parking. So you live here.
It'd be fabulous. Let me ask you this. Have you had communication on your proposal with the mayor and the city officials? And if not, why not?
Well, I did have a tremendous meeting with Chris Ronayne twice. And Chris Ronayne is a planner. He gets it. He absolutely gets it. Without publicly coming out and putting a flag on it, he gets it. So, and he absolutely appreciates what I've created from a designer standpoint because he's a planner. So why would a guy like him be against it? Well, he's not. He's very much in favor of keeping it. Just my reaction, I'm pretty sure he's leaning more towards, keeping it downtown. And he loves the idea of a retractable roof. He understands those benefits long term. Because if you have a covered stadium, look, we could have our own bowl. We could have
you're right.
NCAA. You could have the Big Ten here.
No question. No question. Conventions, even bigger political conventions as well. But then if this planner, you've had meetings with him, and he's certainly impressed and perhaps in favor of your proposal. Why hasn't the city officials, let alone the mayor, you haven't had any contact with them, have you?
No, but I'm approaching trying to do that. Maybe part of what we're doing today is he could know that there's something seriously. I'm not an amateur at this. I've been doing this my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And just to tell you what happened when I did the Hexatron, everybody said you couldn't build this retractable roof. It's too expensive. You can't do it. Well, we did it. And I used a company called American Power Door Company, who does giant airplane hangar doors. They did the Saturn rocket doors. So I figured I got a company that can do big doors like that. The Hexatron it's not a dome. It's a flat pitched roof. So you slide the panels and you don't have to open the structure. You leave the structure, you just slide the skin to open the roof. Well, I worked with them. They helped develop it. We had it done. We had a price on it. The price back then was ridiculous, compared to today. But it was under 100 million. But the idea of having they now became, it's called Unisystems. Unisystems has done 8 of the retractable stadiums that they said could never be built. 8. So I don't know what to do with saying it can't be done, because I know it can be done. And I can tell you right now, I can show them how it can be done more economical with this design of the 6-sided stadium, because it's basically triangles. Triangles are a strong structure when they're tied together. I have, you've got so many people here in the steel business that can help us put this together. I'm starting to talk with them. I've been working with the unions. I've been working with other people from the outside. I have contractors that are here local that will help put it together. I don't have to go to New York to bring contractors to build our stadium. So,
gotcha. Asking you to speculate, where do you think Haslam is? Is he favoring staying in Cleveland? Is he determined to move this to Brook Park? I know because you haven't had any personal contact with him, I'm asking you to speculate, but I am.
My speculation is that he definitely wants to keep the Browns in Cleveland. I don't doubt that for a minute. I don't doubt he plans on moving it. I think that he is looking at from a different perspective than I would look at it or you would look at it. He's looking at it from a business side. And from a business side, he's getting consultants throwing him this, and you can do this. I think he's getting a lot of bad information because, in order to understand Cleveland, you have to be part of what's happened in the past and what's the market? Where's the market going to come from? I was able to bust that market. Everybody said nobody would live in downtown. Well, I did Stonebridge downtown. I did the Flats. I did Nautica. I did Shooters. I did Coconuts. I've been involved with our waterfront my whole career. Everybody said, I remember when they told me, well, nobody ever crossed the river. It's too dangerous over there.
For years, there's been talk of developing the West Shoreway in a similar fashion to Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, as you well know, Bob. And it never did come to fruition. The corrupt politicians, there's no more corrupt politicians in the country than in Chicago, but those corrupt politicians, as opposed to our corrupt politicians, would get things done.
Right.
That never was accomplished, and it was the dream of many business owners. I give you an example of my deceased dear friend Jimmy Swingos, who thought that it would be totally developed the entire West Shore way. If this were to come to the reality of the Hexatron, your idea, your project, I think that would launch the West Side development all the way to Don's to the lighthouse and further. Do you not agree?
Absolutely. And that's what I'm trying to show the Browns. The fact that if they do this and do the start of the development, what about the land that's west of the stadium to the river? It's a beautiful area to become a park like Chicago. That's my plan. If you could develop that park and you tie the flats in with the stadium, now you have one huge lakefront development. Bring the flats to the lake. So I think the port can be moved. And I think there's a lot of talk that has to be resurrected and it has to be put to the test, as we need to get rid of Burke-Rankine Airport, period. If you have to, put the port partially over there, free up that land. There's so many things that will happen if you put the stadium there.
Well, listen, Bob, I have to interrupt because as we are recording this show, our Big Play Sports Studios are located in Burke Lakefront Airport. Now, you'll have to accommodate us with new studios in your new Hexatron plan if you indeed expect support from us, because otherwise, I don't know where we'd be recording this show.
Well, we don't have to take the whole piece of land. We can leave you guys.
What's the next step, Bob? And I want you to give information to the public on how they can see your designs and see the video of what you are creating. But what is the next step, and take us through all that?
Well, I don't want to, I've got to kind of walk on eggs here a little bit, because I don't want to really aggravate what the plans are now and become an outsider that's trying to upheaval what they want trying to do. I'm trying to work with them to give them a better idea. All they need to do is talk to me. I know this city better than anyone else. I developed more property here than anyone else. I know this city, and I know council, I know planning commission, I know everything that's going on with the county. They don't want to move out of Cleveland. Nobody does. They're doing something that's adverse to what everybody else wants. Well, why fight it? Why not just let's work together to come up with something that nobody else has? I'll tell you, that stadium on the water, I'm sure you have been there to San Francisco to see their stadium.
Yes, the baseball stadium you're talking about.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Right on the water.
Yes.
Everybody fought it. Well, you can't build it on the water. You're going to block everybody.
But
they both did. And what a great stadium to go see a baseball game in.
Yeah.
On looking over Alcatraz and the bridges. How great will this stadium be? Right on the lake. Yeah. And then when you can go outside for if you want to talk about where you're going to have tailgating, well, you tailgate on this area I've created around the stadium. I think the idea of creating an icon for Cleveland, and we deserve an icon. It can be as much as an icon, and I think it can be, as the Sydney Opera House is. It could be the point of Cleveland's recognition along with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But you were right about one thing. If he does it here, it'll start developing the West Side. It'll get that avenue. It'll get that freeway out of there. You know what got the freeway out of San Francisco? A nice big earthquake. Because they used to have that same problem.
They had during the World Series.
They had that freeway going above everything. Well, they tore it down. They have this beautiful waterfront now. We need to follow what happened.
Do you need the fans to do anything on your behalf after hearing this? After watching this show,
you know what got the Hexatron going? Is I went public with it. Once I went public with it, everybody was behind the idea. I won out any idea that anybody had. The idea of a retractable roof, a new stadium for the Browns. It won everybody. Everybody wants it. Now, nobody wants to pay for it. So I'm trying to figure out a way how to pay for it, which I did. Now, when I did the plans for the Hexatron, I figured out how to pay for it. And they used my plan. One was I came up with a syntax. The second thing I came up with is you can have naming rights to the stadium. But the big controversial one is, hey, let's sell the seats, seat licensing. Modell said, well, I can't do that. I can't hurt my fans that have been loyal to me. Well, what did he do when he went to Baltimore? It's the seats. So, I mean,
right.
It was a major part of paying for it. I also have another method on this one is advertising budgets for companies are easier to get their money from donations. So we got to figure a way. I have every section. I have 297 sections that I can sell. So each section of the stadium would be named. So the ticket would have their name on it. You'd put their name on it. So there's ways of selling name rights that are huge today. But I'll tell you, the big one is gambling. Gambling is bigger than ever. And we can do the casino. Goodbye. Well, how much money you need?
Yeah.
Period.
Right.
And why shouldn't we could build a stadium on the lake with a hotel and restaurants that would be second to none anywhere in the country.
Right.
It would be the greatest casino on the Great Lakes because it's tied in with a stadium that have the sports betting. It gives them year-round use instead of 8 days a year. We could change the whole city with this idea of staying downtown. And I think Haslam's have to understand how important it is for this project, not to help Brook Park. I love you, Brook Park, but you're not Cleveland.
Right.
Cleveland's the master here, and we have to take care of Cleveland, and that's what we're going to try to do.
Bob, do you have a website the fans can reference?
I haven't developed one for the stadium, but I am.
Okay.
I'm going to put we'll be doing it. And
as soon as you do, inform us. I'll have my producer stay in contact with you, and we'll help you in any way we can once you develop that. And certainly, we wish you nothing but the best. It's all for the greater good of Cleveland. Robert Corna, thank you very, very much for your insight and all that you have revealed. And you have our total support, sir.
That's great. It's great talking to you. Maybe this lights the fire. Maybe let's get me in to see the mayor and see Haslam's. We'll see how this goes. But, all I need is 15 minutes. And I want to meet with them. I don't want to meet with their staff. I got to meet with, because they're the decision makers. They have to understand it.
Got to go right to the top.
They have to understand a fresh output. That's all I'm asking.
No question. All right, Robert, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it, and we'll do this again. Maybe down the line, I'll have Ryan contact you, and we'll set it up again, see where we are at that time. Mr. Robert Corna, when we come back, we'll conclude with the Ask Bruce segment here on Bonus Time with Drennan on the Big Play Sports Network. Back with you, Bonus Time with Drennan, Big Play Sports Network. I want to thank Mr. Robert Corna for joining us. What'd you think, Ryan?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, that was really awesome to listen to. And I mean, I think he's spot on. My biggest preference would be, one, I want it to stay in Cleveland, and then you get a dome and be the best of both worlds. And I think the majority of people, really 90% probably, that would be their preference, because they want to move to Brook Park because that gets the dome. But I think if they knew that there was a possibility to have a dome here in Cleveland, there'd be no reason to leave.
Right. And the project in Brook Park, he made a good point. The planes, first of all, it would have to be below ground level because of the airport, and you'd have to build hotels, and you'd have to build restaurants and all the infrastructure. But just think how that would hurt downtown, too. So we're glad to have featured Mr. Corna. We appreciate your input. Maybe next week on the show we can get some reaction from you on what you think after hearing this gentleman, a distinguished architect and Clevelander, with his proposal. All right, speaking of the fans, the Ask Bruce segment is upon us. Fire away.
Alrighty, Bruce. This one comes from Andy again. He says, Bruce, do you believe that Donovan Mitchell has staked his claim as the second best player in Cavs history behind LeBron? And if not, where would you rank him amongst the wine and gold greats?
What a tremendous... Again, Andy amazes me with his insightful questions and intriguing indeed. You know what? He hasn't been here for as many years as LeBron, but you could make that case. You've certainly got AC, even though the Price Doherty team was a great team, and I do believe they would have perhaps won an NBA championship if not for the fact we were in the same division and conference as a guy by the name of Michael Jordan, which is with the Chicago Bulls. But when you look at that team, is there anybody, Price or Doherty or Hot Rod or Nance that would elevate themselves to answer Andy's question about second best to LeBron? So I would venture to say, yeah, you're onto something there. The question is, how do we keep Mitchell? I failed in the segment, Ryan, that we covered the Cavs earlier in today's show to ask you about his future, but don't you think it's inevitable that he's gone to New York?
I hope not, Bruce. I really, truly, truly, truly hope not. It depends if he the way he's thinking, because on one end, you could look at this Cavs team and yes, be like, oh my gosh, I have to shoulder so much of a load. We're probably not a championship team, maybe not even close. I want to go somewhere where I know I can win and at the very least, compete to win a championship. But then at the other side, if you're Donovan Mitchell, one, you're getting the keys handed to you, and you pretty much already had them for this being your team. You're getting a max deal. You're becoming super, super rich. And then as a legacy, you say, hey, I am one of the best players to ever suit up for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And if I stay here for the next 10 years, I'm amongst the greats right here with LeBron, the greatest player to ever do it. I think there's a multitude of things for him to consider, both that would be good and bad in staying and both with leaving. So I hope, obviously, in our case, that he chooses to stay.
Keep your fingers crossed. Next.
I sure will. Alrighty, next. We know that, okay, so Kyle Manzardo, it says, hey, Bruce, Kyle Manzardo is 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts so far after getting called up. We know it's very early since he got brought up from AAA. When do you start to worry about a player in the majors after getting called up?
Well, I think if he goes 0 for 20 with 20 Ks or even 15, you've got a case, obviously. There's a big difference. As I alluded to earlier, let me be more specific between minor league pitching and major league pitching. One of the big differences, the biggest difference, is the major league pitchers have much more control of their breaking pitches. And as a result, even if you don't throw the ball 98, if you only throw it 92, it makes the fastball appear like it's coming in faster. That's why great pitchers like Bieber, before he got hurt, he was only throwing 92, 93. But because he had such pinpoint control with his breaking pitches, it made when he would spot his fastball look even faster. So that's the big difference that he's going to have to adjust to, and sooner rather than later. But sometimes guys can do it like that, and sometimes it takes them a while, and sometimes they never adjust. Let's hope the latter is not the case.
Already, we're 20% through the regular season already, Bruce. Would you dare give Stephen Vogt a grade so far, and have you noticed anything about his managerial style that is either similar or different to Terry Francona?
I give him an A all the way. I really think he's done a marvelous job. As I've said numerous times here on the show, I thought the biggest offseason move that the Guardians made was keeping Carl Willis as the pitching coach to be right alongside Vogt during the season, especially when you get into the 6th inning and thereafter, because it's so vitally important in knowing how to manipulate the pen. And even more so now with the challenge of all these games and no off days coming up, that we're going to have to really depend on the starters to give us at least 5 innings, preferably more. We haven't had anybody, since Bieber got hurt that's been able to do that, and hopefully Gavin Williams isn't that far off either, but it's going to be vitally important to be careful with that bullpen, which has been sensational this year, to keep them as fresh as possible, considering a starting pitcher may have an outing like last night with Logan Allen. As far as a difference from Francona, I think the biggest difference is that he's not afraid, Vogt is not afraid to switch around the lineup a little bit, play with that lineup a little bit, rather than cementing guys into the 2-hole, the 5-hole, etc. And he experiments with that, and I think that's fresh and good, and it also can accommodate players who get into a mindset that they're the number 3-hole hitter, number 6-hole hitter, when maybe they'd be better as a 2-hole hitter. Maybe somebody at the top of the order would be the pressure would be off, put him down in the 8th hole, or even bat him 9th and be the added leadoff man, if you will. So I like that aspect of Vogt's managerial manipulation of his mind, but making out the lineup on a day-to-day basis.
All right, well, that's a good segue into our last question here, Bruce. We know that without Shane Bieber, we now know that the Guards do not have a true ace out of Logan Allen, Tanner Bybee, and Tristan McKenzie. Who have you been the most pleased with so far?
Well, Bybee is not, Bybee last year was absolutely off the charts tremendous, and I like Logan Allen. I think he's a finesse pitcher. Just because he had a horrible outing last night against Detroit doesn't mean I'm giving up on him. I think he's got a lot of Jamie Moyer in him. I really do. Bybee has tremendous potential. McKenzie has been a little bit of a disappointment. I expected more out of him, but the poor guy, I don't know if he's fully healthy. He has been injury-prone throughout his entire minor league career, and so far, unfortunately, in his major league career. So I don't know if I can even make a choice between the three thus far in the very early stages of this 24 campaign.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Bruce.
That's all the time we have for Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, next week, Gene Winters, hopefully not to wrap up the NBA season with our Cavaliers. He'll be joining us. And also Mike Yeager, the head golf professional, Columbia Hills Country Club, where I'm a member, will preview the PGA, which is that following weekend as the second major of the 4 big ones in professional golf. I'm Bruce Drennan on behalf of Ryan Smith. Have a good week. We'll see you next week. Until then, as always, and most importantly, you remember, I love you, Ohio. And I love you, Cleveland. Now here is the risk that Brown had to take with